listened to the new project. Obviously, I know some of the history too, and yeah, you've had an interesting career. You know, it's kind of exciting that you're getting now kind of like, would you call it like a second chance in this band with Freakshow?
Yeah, I guess judges. What do you say? The judges will accept that one. Yeah, the second chance. Yeah, it's long overdue. It's a long overdue chance, actually. Being so overlooked in the business for so long. Everybody says you deserve it, so I'm going to go with that.
Yeah, and then Greg Chaisson, who was the original bass player, was actually the one that recommended you. And didn't he follow you when you left Steeler?
I'm glad you brought that up. Here's the weird Twilight Zone connection of the dots. I was in a band called Steeler with a guy named Ron Keel, and then I was in a band called Surgical Steel with a guy named Jim Keeler. And then Greg Chaisson followed me in both of those bands.
Oh, he followed you in both. Okay, that's funny.
Yeah, he came in Steeler after Malmsteen and I left. There was Mitch Perry came in and Ron Murray on bass, but Ron Murray got his hand caught in a door while they were at playing Perkins Palace, so he was out of action. So Greg Chaisson slipped into that. So he kind of followed me technically in Steeler, and then when I was in Surgical Steel in '87. When I left the band, Greg came. He was originally in Surgical Steel years before that, so he just kind of returned back to the band. But it was like right after I left. So that's kind of a weird Twilight Zone kind of connection of dots there.
Yeah, and then you also have a connection with Carlos Cavazo because you had
Yes,
almost joined Quiet Riot at one point. Like, what happened there?
very true. I was in the studio with Sin. We were recording our album master demo by with Dana Strum was producing that, and I got a phone call in the middle of the night. I don't remember how he got my number, but a very inebriated Kevin Dubrow called me up and said that they wanted me to come fill in and do a tour with them. And I said, "This is a joke, right? I mean, I've always been I'm at the brunt of somebody's joke at some point." He says, "No, I'm serious." He goes, I'm drunk as hell right now, and I'm stoned off my face, but I'm serious." He goes, "Your name came up. You were recommended, and we want you to do this tour with us." He says, "The thing is, you can't tell anybody. You got to keep it under wraps." And I said, "All right, mum's the word." And he says, "You're going to meet with Frankie Bonelli. Frankie's going to hand off the set list to you on a cassette. You'll learn those songs, and then you're going to go work with Carlos, and until we can do a whole band rehearsal." I said, "All right, fine." So I met Frankie. He gave me the tape. I went to Carlos's house a couple of times, and we started working on the songs. Again, I kept my word. I didn't say anything to anyone. What happened? One time, Frankie picked me up, and I was at his house in the Hollywood Hills, and he had somebody showed up at the door, a couple of girls, and I was in one room. I could see through the other couple of rooms. They were in the other rooms talking to him, and they did look, turn their head, they looked, they saw me, but nothing was said. I didn't really acknowledge them or anything. So it could have been that, or somehow, I don't know how, he has a reputation for this, but Dana Strum had his fingers on everything going on in LA. The guy was like connected. Somehow he found out and called me up and told me, "Don't take the gig. They're just going to stab you in the back. They'll use you and stab you in the back and dump you." He goes, "Don't do it. Don't do it," like that. And I'm like, "How do you know? How did you find out about this?" He goes, "Hey man, it's LA. It's Hollywood." That's the backpedal, the default backpedal. I don't remember how he found out. People talk, I guess. Their manager at the time, Warren Etner, got me expedited me a passport really quickly out of the federal building down in West LA. And again, I said nothing. And one night I walked into the Rainbow, and then Frankie was there, and he took issue with me. He went ballistic, yelling at me. He says, "I told you to keep your mouth shut." He goes, "The whole world knows." I said, I don't know how." I said, "No, I'm down in Venice. I live in Venice at the time. I'm not talking to anybody. So I don't know how the word got out, but it wasn't for me." And he wouldn't believe me. He got mad. Warren Etner got mad. They withdrew the whole thing, and they hired some unknown kid. I found out they did this the South American tour, and then when he came back, they dumped the kid. So like that. And I mentioned that when we were shooting the video, the Freakshow videos, we went out, took a dinner break, and Carlos was sitting across from me like you are. And I said, whatever had you remember that issue? Whatever happened with that? I never got any closure on that. He goes, I don't know. He goes, I didn't hear anything about any of the details about it. I just said, you were in and then you were out. And I really don't remember anything about it. So that was that. But Carlos and I had a little bit of already worked together briefly in the past. And I knew Stet when he first got to LA. Stet and I, I was working at a moving company called Starving Students. They had huge van lines, and we would move people from apartments and houses. And Stet came in with another guy, long-haired rock and roll guy, and that's how we met, and we became friends. We went out on the trucks and we were working together. We were moving people, their furniture and whatnot, and that's how we first bonded, and we have been friends ever since. So that's kind of how Stet and I connected, and then Carlos and I connected. Here we are, multi-decades later, and Greg, what happened was there was somebody posted in Facebook that Steel Panther had played or were taping a segment with America's Got Talent, right? So I got in on that discussion thread. I don't remember whose thread it was, and I said, I should be in a band like that. I don't know why I'm not in a band like Steel Panther. And everybody went, yeah, you're right. And somehow Greg Chaisson saw that post, and he tagged Ronnie's name. And Ronnie and I know so many of the same people in this industry, yet we've never met. He's worked with a lot of big stars and a lot of people in the industry. He's an excellent songwriter. He's got a reputation for incredible songwriting, and yet we never met. Things like that happen all the time in the business. So Greg put me in touch with Ronnie. He contacted Ronnie because he had just finished recording the Freakshow album with them, and he says, but I can't commit to the band. He was in Atomic Kings at the time. He just left that band, but he's got his guitar store, music store in Phoenix, a Bizarre Guitar. He's settled there in Phoenix, family and whatnot. And he says, I can't commit to the album. I have too many other commitments. So the conversation I was told, Ronnie says, well, who can you refer anybody, recommend someone? And he says, Rik Fox. So first thing out of my mind goes, Rik is the guy you're looking for. He's a good bass player. This music has his name all over it. He's the guy and plus he'll promote the hell out of you. Rik's like always promoting something. So he hooked me up with Ronnie. And Ronnie, I talked over the phone and we discussed some things. And he talked to Stet. He said Stet gave the thumbs up. He talked to Carlos. Carlos says, yeah. He goes, I'll work with Rik. Yeah, definitely. So I got the vote of confidence from everybody. And he says, you got the gig. You're in the band. And I hadn't even played with them yet. This is just on reputation alone and good recommendations like that. And Greg and I have become closer friends over the years. We were not that close in the 80s. And I think Greg will admit he's kind of a cynical guy. He much like myself, he doesn't tolerate people's drama and BS like that, and he'll call it right on the spot. And sometimes you tend to rub people the wrong way in the business by doing that because you don't tolerate their drama. So Greg and I have over time I've talked on the internet about my bass influences, and I mentioned Humble Pie and Grand Funk Railroad and Uriah Heep. Bands with really solid bass players, melodic, solid bass players. Even though I'm kind of known as being a metal guy and I played Steeler and play hard rock and heavy metal, a lot of people don't know my roots. And when Greg saw that, he talked to me. He says, I got the same. I didn't know you were into these same bands. I said, yeah, this is the era, in the 70s, from 60s to the 70s. This was a lot of what I was listening to and my influences were. And Greg goes, well, I have the same influences. So we had that in common. So with that commonality, Greg figured, well, if I can't, I'm not going to, I can't commit to this. I'll give you the next best guy who could do that. And Greg said, when I first got the scratch tracks to put my bass lines to, he goes, none of these songs had titles. There was no vocals. It was just rhythm tracks, just guitar and drums. So I wrote what I was feeling at that particular moment. He says, this should be really easy for you. He goes, you can do whatever you want with my bass lines. He goes, it's free reign. Do what you feel. I said, well, out of deference, I have to play them the way they're recorded on the album. And he goes, and we could always do whatever fills you want in between that. And I went, all right, that's fair enough. And so I've been spending the last several months, learning the album, and I've got a large majority of Greg's bass lines down like that. But he's a very tasteful player in the pocket, and I like what he's done in his patterns of what he's playing, what he's saying, what he brought to the table in his presentation of his bass lines and all the Freakshow songs. He nailed it. He totally nailed it. And I'm thinking, I probably would have played something that's the same like that too. And I've added a couple of my own flourishes here and there, some other little things to that. But when I said to him, "What did you play in this song? What did you play?" And he goes, "I don't know. They didn't have titles." He goes, "Now I know what songs they were," like that.
Oh.
So like in the beginning of the intro of Full on Shred, FOS. There's that intro, and then Greg does some kind of like a harmonic thing on a string. There's like a stop, and he says, I said, "What are you doing?" Like a harmonic thing? And he says, "Yeah." And I said, "Yeah, because I figured live, they're not going to hear that. That goes by so fast, that little plung." So I just slide up and I do like a really high G chord, so it's a little bit more pronounced and you can hear it. I copy some things like from Lemmy. Lemmy played bass chords. And me being in so many bands over the years with one guitar, I got a wide area to fill, and there's going to be granted some dropout if there's no extra guitar. So I've learned, do some fills here and there and fatten up the empty space with bass chords here and there, 2-chord, three note chord, things like that. And that's kind of what I did in some of the Freakshow material. So everybody will get to hear that when we finally get out and do it live.
So you guys have plans for upcoming live shows?
That's more of a Ronnie and Stet question. Well, Ronnie, obviously the band leader, so he makes the decisions, but he's put the bookings in Stet's department. Stet's real connected, in the industry, obviously with W.A.S.P and Metal Church. They just came off a Metal Church tour. So Stet is going to predominantly handle, as far as it's told to me, Stet's handling all the bookings and the shows. And Stet says to me, if you see something you think I might be interested in, chances are I probably already know about it, but send it to me anyway, and I'll take a look at it, because he knows all these promoters.
Yeah. So how did they, so it was more Ronnie started this band? Because I was just curious, like the Carlos is in this band. It's almost like but he didn't want to do Quiet Riot. Because I feel like if he wanted, I'm sure that they would love to have him back as an original member. And I feel like he'd almost have full reign of that band now as one of the lone living members. With him and Rudy could run it together, but he'd rather do this than the Quiet Riot.
That's an interesting point. It's not my place to speak for Carlos. I think there's probably some personal or politics, band politics. There's some reasons why Carlos does not want to rejoin Quiet Riot. And he, in his own words, he said, "I really don't need to tour with anybody." He goes, "I'm happy to sit at home." He goes, "I'm fine. I'm doing well. I don't really need to go run out and play with any bands." He goes, "Ronnie asked me to play on this. I really like the material. And sure, I'll do shows with you guys. I'll be a member of the band like that." And right now he was filling in with his brother's band with Hurricane, because they had some gigs already booked and they didn't want to lose them. So his brother Tony advertised that Carlos was in Hurricane. So naturally people are going, "Well, if he's in Hurricane, I thought he was in Freakshow. What's going on?" So I called Ronnie and said, "People are asking me, what do you want me to tell them?" I said, "He's just filling in. He's not like joining Hurricane permanently."
Okay.
And Tony may have some issue with that. I don't know why, but the way it was told to me, Carlos is just filling in. He's helping out his brother's band, but
Okay.
he's a member of Freakshow. So again, I can't speak for Carlos about why he doesn't want to do a Quiet Riot. He has done some stuff with Ratt, of course. He even stepped in and did some stuff with King Cobra. But as far as I know, he's not going out with them either. So
Yeah. So would it be like a lot of shows with Freakshow? Like you guys talking like national or world tour? Or are you just saying like a few live shows kind of close nearby where you all live?
From your lips to God's ears, knock on wood, we'll get something. Again, that's Stet's department. So I don't know. We're hoping for bigger shows, obviously, because you have a magnitude of Carlos Cavazo and Stet, and like
And yourself.
well, I had never attained that A level that they've been at. I haven't toured. The last time I toured a tour was in Canada, like 1980, 81. You know, I played like 5 of the biggest clubs in Toronto, and that was it. If you want to consider that, that's like a tour. It was over a week, several. It's like 3 nights in 5 different clubs.
Hmm.
Each 3 nights in each club. Nickelodeon, Spats, you know, all the biggest clubs that were at the time in Toronto. Uh, so I haven't done anything on the magnitude like the rest of the guys have done it. You know, my peers and whatnot. So um, I'd have to, you know, put my cats in boarding because my wife passed away, so I don't have. There's nobody to watch the cats like that. And so we hope to get, you know, some bigger shows, you know, and get out there and do it. We haven't even played together in the same room yet, and the anticipation is like it's itching us. We're burning to get in the room and play together, you know.
So are you thinking like a headlining club tour, or are you thinking maybe get an opening slot on a bigger, more like a more established band? Because you guys are obviously a newer band, even though you have the reputation, but it might be easier to just jump on to a band that's already got a tour
Yeah,
going. Right?
I'm thinking that's the way Ronnie wants to go. He said he wanted to go go out and support Queensryche, and then I saw on Facebook Queensryche and Armored Saint announced that they got that gig. So I sent it to Ronnie because he hadn't seen it yet. I said, well, there goes the Queensryche, you know, slot. Armored Saint is the support for Queensryche. So and he was disappointed, you know, obviously. So but if we can get
What
something
about,
on,
here's a crazy idea. What if you toured with Quiet Riot and then maybe Carlos steps in for a few songs just for fun with Quiet Riot? Like that'd be a fun show.
that's not my call. I can't speak for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that's you know very can handle this very capably.
Yeah. Well, there's
And
so
like that.
many great bands of that era that you guys would pair up nicely with. So I'm sure if you just keep, you know, put your top choices, Queens, right? Maybe then just keep going down the list until you find something. I'm sure
Yeah,
something will match
yeah,
up for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting though. You have not actually done a tour since that, because I know you were in a bunch of bands in the 80s and you played on the Steeler record and you played a little bit with W.A.S.P, but not an actual tour since the early 80s.
That's true. And looking back, I retrospectively, it looks like most of the bands, except from the bands that I formed, most of the other bands that I joined, I was replacing somebody else. You know, they were letting go of somebody. You know, they wanted me in the. You know, I apparently, I guess I bring something to the table that was missing with them, whether it's in my style on stage, whatever I bring by way of experience to the bands. But I kept joining all of these bands that I was replacing their bass players, and unfortunately, it looked great at the time, and they wound up becoming sinking ships.
Hmm.
So after Sin broke up, my last lineup of Sin, and that imploded, I got an offer to audition for Burn. Burn was formerly Hellion, you know, minus Anne Boleyn. And so I knew those, and Dana produced their demo as well. So just out as I guess a formality, I said, do I really need to audition? You guys know what I can do. Jesus, everybody's heard the Steeler album. They said, well, just as a formality. So I learned 5 songs. I went in, and I not to just play the songs. I didn't just stand there. I moved around with the guys in the band. I went up to the guitar, went up to Ray, went up to Alan, and I was like playing close to them, you know, physically. And then, you know, I kind of went back. I don't just stand still. I'm not one of those guys that stand still. I feel the music. It moves through me. I interpret it physically, and that's what I do. And they dug that. And they said they left a decision over who was going to be the bass slot and Burn with their drummer, Sean. And they called me up and they said, well, Sean decided and they want this other guy. I said, all right, fine. A few days later, they called me back and they said, well, come to find out, the guy that Sean said okay to, he doesn't own any gear. He doesn't have a way to get around. He's got no amps, no basses, no nothing. He just kind of borrowed it, stepped in, did the gig. And so you came in second. I'm sorry to say, but would you reconsider joining us? Because we really liked playing with you. I said, you know, and not to be you know, difficult or anything. I seriously, the way my head was at the time, still trying to wrap my head around the disillusion, dissolving of Sin. I said to Alan, let me think about it like that. and not egotistical or anything. I said, seriously, let me just think about this. Let me process this. And a day or two went by. Alan called me up again. He goes, well, have you decided? Have you decided? I went, okay. So, and I had seen Byrne play. They sounded like almost a little like Dio, because their singer at the time, Richard Perico, he was like a Ronnie Jr. Kind of resembled him a little. He had a lot of similar delivery as Ronnie did. So I said, okay. So I joined Byrne. I played with them for several months. We were rehearsing at Mates in North Hollywood, and they were managed by Niji. Went Ronnie's management company, Niji. Him, Ronnie, and Wendy. But the guy that managed us directly, his name was Kurt Lorraine. So he was on the staff below Wendy, and Wendy at the time was managing Rough Cut. And Ronnie really wanted, the way it was told to me, Ronnie wanted a more push behind Byrne and less push at that time behind Rough Cut. This is just what I'm being told. And so that's kind of where it was at. And then they fired the singer. They fired Richard Perico. So I approached, what's his name? The original singer from Anthrax.
Neil Turbin. Yeah, Neil, I think I had that in my notes. Yeah, and then he turned it down though. Right?
Yeah, Neil turned it down, and we were friends at the time. We're not now, but we were friends at the time. And so he said he wants to do his own thing, because I had already jammed with Neil. That's why his name came to my mind. He had the voice that was capable of singing Byrne's material. And he said, "No, I want to do my own thing." I went, "All right, fine." So I was at the time I was friends with the road manager for Loudness. They had just released their Lightning Strikes album. It was doing really well, and it was going to be their first headline tour of the U.S. with Poison and Cinderella flip-flopping each city over who's going to open and who's going to do the middle slot, like that. And I was friends with Scotty Ross, who was Poison's tour manager at the time. Like, I got to ride with them on the bus and whatnot. Well,
you got to ride on the bus with Poison?
Yeah.
Oh, there's got to be a story there. That sounds amazing.
They say, come on. Yeah. Scotty goes, come on, get on the bus, ride with us, like that. And I knew the guys in Poison. When Steeler moved out of the Steeler mansion, the roach-infested place where we were living, Poison moved in. And I was at one of their after parties at their house up in the Hollywood Hills. And that's how I bonded with Bobby Dahl. He says, yeah, we moved into there. Brett's like, yeah, we moved in there. And Bobby goes, I had the nicest room. It had like a bunk bed, like you would see in a railroad coach, and curtains and the carpet. It was decorated really nice. I said, that was my room. It was right next to the rehearsal room. So Bobby goes, yeah, I got the best room in the band, in the facility, like that. So that's kind of how we became friends, like that. And then and so Poison and Cinderella were kind of, and I had tour laminates from Loudness, so I could go wherever I wanted with them. So I went to see them in Bakersfield. I went to see them here. I went to see them. I went out to Phoenix. I don't remember how I got there, but I went to see them in Phoenix. And I was walking around at the concert hall, and I met this guy who's a local promoter, Brad Laughlin. I talked to him for a few minutes, and he saw that I gave him an extra laminate. So I said, don't drift. All right. I'm responsible for these passes. And so we were walking around, and he introduced me to Jim Keeler, then of Surgical Steel. And he said, this is, Rik Fox, blah, blah, blah. He goes, oh yeah. He goes, you played on the Steeler album. I said, yeah, that's me. He goes, yeah, you played with Malmsteen. I said, yeah, I did. Like that. First bassist on U.S. soil to go toe to toe with Malmsteen on a daily basis and survive. So, and that was brief. It was a brief meeting. That was it. I went back to LA, and literally, as I put the key in a door and I'm walking into my apartment, my phone is ringing, and it's this guy, Brad Laughlin. He's going, Jimmy wants you to come back to Phoenix. He goes, he wants you to Surgical Steel. You got to come right away. You got to come right away. I said, easy, lighten up, Francis. Let me see what this is about first. I don't even know you guys. I don't know anything about. So I made some phone calls. I said, what's the story? Who is Surgical Steel? I hadn't seen them in that movie yet that they were in, Thunder Rally, whatever it was. And somebody said, yeah, if you like Judas Priest, you'll like Surgical Steel. He sounds just like Judas Priest. Oh, okay. So I called up Keeler, and they flew me out back to Phoenix. I brought my bass. I said, when is the audition? And Jimmy called everybody Chief. He goes, Chief, there's no audition. You got the gig. I know you can play. I got the Steeler album. Here's the tape. Here's the songs. Learn these. We're recording an album next week. That's how it was presented to me. I was like, wow. So I stayed at Keeler's house. I was woodshedding, learning the songs, and he brought in another drummer because what happened is Jimmy had sacked the whole lineup of the original lineup of Surgical Steel. He fired everybody, and he wanted to start over. And Surgical Steel was like next to Icon. They were like the next big fish in a little pond in Phoenix. So, you know, Surgical Steel was had that kind of reputation there. I, of course, knew nothing about Phoenix or any of this. So I was a fish out of water in Phoenix. And I started learning the songs. He brings in a drummer. We're rehearsing in a garage. And I can't lock in with this guy. There's just, you know, this is a problem. So I said to Jimmy, come in and just listen to us. And he listened and he listened. And I looked at Jimmy. Jimmy looked at me and he nodded. And he had to wind up letting this drummer go because the guy's meter was all over the place. And it was a really nice guy, looked great. I think he had a drinking problem. So that affected, you know, other things. And so we brought in Randy. Oh my God! I should hit myself in the foot for this. He was a drummer for one of the other bands in Phoenix. Great, Randy Marchetti, great drummer, incredible drummer. And Randy came in and did the live shows with us. But when it came to the studio, Jimmy had to call his old drummer back in. I think it was Bob Mylan, and to do the tracks with us. And I had brought in some material to record as well.
Didn't you record Dawkins drummer Mick Brown on one track?
I was getting to that. Yeah. One of the songs I brought in was and there's another side story attached to this song. It was called "We Got Your Rock," and of course Ace Frehley did it, but we did it in Sin. We recorded it too because it was done by an outside writer. He worked with Jay and the Americans. And that's where that song originally came from. And it was handed down to me through a series of other proxies. And so Mick Brown and George Lynch showed up at the studio. It was El Chaton in Phoenix recording studios. And they said, why don't you, we'll play you the song and you and Rik can play it together. And he goes, all right. So he listened to a couple of passes. You know, meanwhile, George is out. George is in the lobby and you can hear the razor blade on the glass, and I'm looking at the pile, and I'm going, oh, I'm getting sick to my stomach looking what there's half a Peru on the coffee table, and you chop 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 chop. Anyway, so because Mick was staying at George's place,
sure,
and so we got in, and Keeler's like, but, and our producer Dan Wexler from Icon, he goes, Jimmy, get out of there, leave him alone. He shuts the door, and Mick and I think we did one pass together, and then we hit record. And we played as if we came out of the womb, locked in gear. You know, I mean, it just locked. I locked in with Mick immediately. And then when we were done, he looks at me, he goes, I don't know why people talk about you, that you're not that good. He goes, you're just as good as
Jeff Pilson?
Oh my God. Yes, Pilson. Thank you. He goes, you're just as good as Jeff. And I said, wow, that's a high compliment. Thank you. You know, and I'm friends with Pilson. We've been friends, for many years like that. And so I took that as a very high compliment, from and Mick Brown. I mean, if he's calling it, it must be true. And that was my Surgical Steel story. That was just, we
you do some live performances with them where you guys opened for Lita Ford?
Right.
Yeah. It was just locally. You didn't tour, you're saying?
No, we didn't tour. Jimmy had this huge stage thing built. The drum riser was welded aircraft aluminum, and each of the steps had dummy Randall heads in them that all lit up like they were on. It was just a red light. They were all empty. And I called my Randall rep, Bill Acton at Randall Amps, and I said, we got this huge show where we're supporting Lita Ford. Can you get us some backline gear just so we can, fill it up? He goes, yeah. And he brought in, I had like 9 bass cabinets. Jimmy had, I think, 7 stacks, double or triple stacks. I mean, we took up the entire back wall of the club. I think it was Rockers in Phoenix. So we're sound checking, we got there early in the afternoon. We're sound checking. and I see a shadow behind me in coming in through the doorway, and I turn around, and it's Lita Ford standing there, and her jaw was on the floor, just silent. She stood there, and she's looking up, she's panning up, and she's looking at all the wall of amps, the drum riser, the other wall of amps, and she's like, "Holy shit!" She goes, "We don't even have gear like this." She goes, "Could we use your gear?"
Wow.
When the headliner's asking the support, "Can we use your gear?" Like that. So
That's interesting.
that's
And that was
really
like
funny.
that was a year or two or an album or two into her career. Like she was doing very well at the time. Yeah.
She
Well, what
was.
didn't you also have a connection with Motley Crue? Like you literally lived next door to Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee when they were in that crappy apartment, the one that they showed in the dirt.
Yeah, 1140 North Clark Street. That was a pretty infamous apartment building. The guys from DeMalls lived in there. They had the apartment facing the pool. There was a bunch of rocker chicks that lived in there. What happened was after I received my walking papers from W.A.S.P, I literally had no place to go. I didn't know that many people. I tried networking with whoever I could, but we didn't have internet, so there was nobody to check, my resume. I could just tell them, I worked with Thor. I know the guys in Kiss. That didn't really get me much. So, one of the girls that I became friends with that lived in one of those apartments, she was one of the escorts that worked under Heidi Fleiss and Madame Alex. She ran an escort company. She had girls in all different parts of L.A. This girl whose apartment it was, Roxy, she felt bad about what happened with me with W.A.S.P. So she says, "You know what? Come and stay at our place until you get on your feet," which is my introduction to what they call the couch tour. You know, so she gave me a roof over my head, a place to sleep and eat. She had a huge 2-bedroom apartment. And when the girls would come back in with their money, they're looking for places to hide their cash. So I became like this. It was like Jerry Lewis as a houseboy. I vacuum the carpets, I do the dishes, I do the cleaning. I wasn't just slouching. And the girls would come back. "Well, I need to hide my money. I need to hide my money." So I found all these little cubby places in the apartment. Peel up the carpet here behind the couch, put something over there, and I would hide their money for them. And we're talking. These girls would come back with wads of money. They were escorting like rich Arabs. They were arm candy essentially for as escorts. And then they'd come back later, go, "Where's my money? I need my money." And I go back to the spot, and here's your money, here's your money, here's your money, like that. So that's what I did. And we shared the wall right next door with the apartment that Motley Crue used to live in, who pretty much, Vince had already moved out. He was around the corner on Larrabee with his first wife. Tommy had moved out. Mick had moved out. But I did see Tommy there at that building before I had even moved in. I was just visiting there at one point. I met Tommy outside by the elevator, and we became quick friends. "Hi, how you doing?" "I'm from New York." "Oh yeah, cool," like that. I just got in town. But Nikki lived there, and the stories about them having the lock broken off from being kicked in so many times, the door, that's true. There was no lock on the door. He would push a chair on the inside up against the door to keep it shut, like that. But
Did you get to go to any of the parties they had?
No, not there. I mean, there was parties at the building, but not in their apartment. There was other, the Jamal's had parties in their apartment. There was parties in other apartments in that building.
Well, was that
But
so? Is that not the apartment from the dirt, like the one that's in the book and the movie where they had all the parties? Is that the same apartment, or is
yeah, that's the same apartment. I haven't
but
seen.
they had all moved out.
Yeah, I haven't seen
Nikki.
them. I haven't seen the movie. I didn't read the book.
Okay, you got to see that movie. It's classic.
Yeah. So Nikki was not doing too well financially yet, and he was running an extension tap from Roxy's apartment. There was an extension line running around the back patio and into the sliding door on his side and plug, so he'd have electricity. See,
He
like
didn't
that.
even have electricity?
No.
Wow.
And I walked in at one point, and he's sitting on the floor with a blanket on him. And there's like guitar picks on the floor and crumpled pieces of paper. It was like, it didn't look like it wasn't cleaned like that. But one day Roxy goes, "I need something from Nikki. Can you go knock on the door? I need to talk to him." I said, "Sure." So I go over next door and I'm knocking on the door and I hear him inside going, yeah. I said, it's Rik from next door. I said, Roxy wants to talk to you. He goes, come on in, dude. So I go to push the door and, there's a chair behind, push the door. And he had pushed two red leather love seats and he pushed them together. So they formed like a box, like a pit couch right there, just inside the door on the left. And he had come out of that. And we were talking. He was getting dressed or something. He said, yeah, Roxy wants to talk to you about something. And I seen a blanket move. And I looked over and I seen blonde hair just poking out over the top of the blanket. And then I said, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt. You got company. And I see the blanket start to come down like this. And I see the eyes and the blonde hair. And I knew immediately just from the eyes who it was. And she pulled it. I saw her face. I went, Lita? She goes, hey, dude.
Wow.
And I said, he was, dating, stooping Lita Ford at the time. And I said, I don't know if you remember me. I said, you when you were in the Runaways, you guys played CBGBs. She goes, yeah. I said, that's where we first met. After the show, me and Michael Monroe, Michael from the band Harlow. I said, we were talking, you and Jackie. She goes, that's where I know you from. She goes, she remembered, because they looked like Punky Meadows. So she remembered, the hair. People remember the look and all. And she got out of the blanket thing and she was just partially dressed. And I turned around, but she said, "Come on, let's go out for breakfast." And I'm like, "Well, I'm broke. I'm here from New York. I don't have any money, like that." And she goes, "Don't worry about it, dude. I got it." So she took me and Nikki out to breakfast. So, I mean, there's another pinch me moment. I'm sitting across from Lita Ford and she's buying me breakfast. And me and Nikki Sixx, she's buying us both breakfast. I mean, it was like, wow, it's one of my first brushes with greatness in LA.
Wow. Did you guys talk a lot about music and the music business and stuff, or was it just like talking about everyday stuff?
Local stuff, things like that, the scene, what it's like, we didn't talk so much about business from what I can remember. And that was when I kind of first started really bonding with Nikki, because years later when I had Sin and he would come by the apartment that I was staying at, and we just sit outside on the hood of somebody's car. On Lancashire Boulevard, there was a huge liquor store called Jumbo Circus or something, and Nicky used to get his liquor from there. And we'd sit on a hood of somebody's car, just like we do in New York. And we'd sit there, just drinking a beer and just talking about this, that, and the other. And Nikki was telling me about the business and what was happening with him and everything. When Shout at the Devil came out, or right before it came out, he called me up. He had my number, and he said, "Listen, we got a bigger budget for more gear and everything, so I'm getting rid of my old stuff. I have some of my amps out at SIR in Hollywood, and if you want it, go get it. It's yours." I said, "Seriously?" He says, "Dude," he goes, "you're a cool guy, and I know you probably need it, so you can have my gear." And I checked with SIR, and I said, "Yeah, I got a ride." I went down there, and it was his old V4B cabinets that he used when he was in Motley Crue. I mean, the Too Fast for Love era. Those were his amps he always played, in the Club Whiskey and Starwood and all that. And the guy walked. I said, "Rik Fox." He goes, "Okay, yeah." He goes, "Nikki called." He goes, "You can grab that cabinet and that head right there." He goes, "That's yours." And the other cabinet went to somebody else, like that. So Nikki, of all the people in LA, he didn't have to do that. He gave me an amp. He gave me the amp head. Later on, he had me come over his apartment on Coldwater, and he gave me the red leather stiletto thigh high boots that he wore. In one of the videos, he used to light them on fire. He gave me those. He gave me some shirts, some belts.
Do you still have all that stuff?
I have the boots. I still have the boots. They're not red leather anymore. I was an extra in one of the movies I was in, and it was a club scene with like a B&D S&M club. Everybody was wearing black. So I wrapped the boots in black gaffer's tape. And then when I went to peel the tape off, it started to take the leather with it. I went, I just painted myself into a corner. It says Nikki Sixx in the boots. He wrote on them in pen. But, if you peel it carefully, you can see it's still red leather under the tape. But yeah, I still have them. They're here like that. But I haven't talked to Nikki in years.
Yeah, that's really cool. So why do you think when you look back on your career, because I mean, you were in W.A.S.P for a little bit, you made the Steeler album, Surgical Steel, all these other projects, Sin, like 3 versions of Sin, and some other things that you've done, Spiders and Snakes, and all this. Like, why do you think a guy like Nikki Sixx makes it so big, and you didn't? Because I mean, as even Mick Brown said, like you can play just as good as Jeff Pilson, so you had the chops, you had the look. I mean, it sounds like you had the networking, you had all these connections. What do you think happened?
You know, let me put it this way. One of the first night that when I first got to LA and I was staying at Blackie's house, there was still a little bit of jet lag. We didn't just jump right into the audition process. So he took me out. We went to the Troubadour, and I walk in, and in the lobby, right there standing is Kevin Dubrow. I recognized him because I had the Japanese copies of Quiet Riot back in my apartment in Jersey. Those 2 imports with Randy Rhodes and Rudy. Like that. So I went up. We started talking, and I said, "I'm Rik Fox. I just got in from New York, and I said I'm going to audition for Blackie's band." Blackie already had a reputation. Everybody knew who he was. He was already damaged goods. But the thing that Kevin told me was, "Be careful." Just like the song "The Backstabbers" by the OJ's. He goes, "That's L.A. There's always somebody that wants your gig. Don't trust anyone. Don't believe anything that anyone tells you." He goes, "Because there'll always be somebody waiting right behind you for your gig, and if they can find a way to push you out of it, they will." That's LA. It's very competitive. It's very sandbox. It's like the Little Rascals sandbox drama, and I've run into that so many times over the years. Being from New York, I was kind of an outsider, so I didn't have that LA mentality. So I didn't tolerate the drama and the BS and any of the stuff that's affiliated with that. And I guess just out of necessity, I had to develop a little bit more of an assertive, not aggressive, but an assertive confidence of the personality. And some people find that threatening for some reason. They perceive a territorial threat or something if you're confident in yourself. And so people talk, people say things behind your back. Uh, I witnessed it myself. I was at the Troubadour one night, and one of the bigger local bands that went on to become huge to this day, watching another band on stage, and I'm standing there and I hear them all mocking this band on stage, cracking jokes at their expense. And this guy sucks, and look what he's doing, and that guy's a joke. Excuse me. And then after the show, I knew the guys in the band that was on stage. We're up in the dressing room, and there's the same guys in that band going, "Hey, you were great. Oh yeah, you guys kicked ass." And I saw it for myself firsthand. The BS, the drama, the backstabbing, the talking out of both sides of your mouth, like that. And that's what this town is made of. And you have to grow a veneer, some kind of protective coating to not tolerate that. And if you're lucky enough to work yourself into a position, I don't want to say of authority, but if you're in a band that becomes like a headliner, it's either going to happen more or less. And there's always somebody that wants your gig. My guys in my band in Sin came to me, my second lineup, and said, "People are talking. They're trying to get us to leave, kick you out, or leave working with you and come play with them in their band." My guys at least had the professional courtesy to tell me that this was going on. So I knew it to be a fact like that. And it's just like Kevin Dubrow said, people they'll manipulate whatever they can do to get you out of where you're at because they desire your position like that. And I get ribbed a lot about my the hairstyle I had. I looked like Punky Meadows at that. I'll be honest. I copied his hairstyle back in New York before I even came to LA. And the hair cutter, the rock and roll hair cutter I went to, was getting Hurley Ree from Hair Pirates out by Pasadena. He was the guy who was cutting my hair. He knew how to do that cut, and they had the band picture on the wall. He says, "Rick, you've bought me a lot of business." And I said, "What did I do?" He goes, all these guys in the bands come in. He goes, "They go right to your picture, and they point to you, and I go, cut my hair like that guy." So he says, "I've been cutting all of these guys' hair that in your hairstyle." And a lot of these are the same guys that are out talking crap about me, So this is the kind of what I had to go through. This is LA. It was another planet. In New York, we didn't have that kind of mentality. There was a little bit of competitiveness, but it was more larger a scope of a family. We were all in this together. In LA, it was every man for himself. So I kind of had to adapt to
Interesting.
that. You see,
That's really interesting.
and
The two
uh,
scenes
uh,
were so different.
well, I happened to be watching one of your interviews last night. I was up till 4:30 in the morning watching your interview with Don Dokken.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, it was great. I listened, watched the whole, and I think some of what I'm saying, Don validated by when he was talking about the LA scene and what people were like. So it was there. It was evident, and some guys just lay low. They're quiet. They know how to navigate and be happy friends with everybody. Say something nice and good about everybody, and they get gigs and they go from place to. Rudy Sarzo is a great bass player. He's
I was
friends
gonna
with
say that's a great
everybody.
example. He's been in he's Whitesnake, Quiet Riot. I mean, he's been in so many different
Blue Oyster
projects.
Cult, Queensryche, this band,
Yeah.
that band. He's one of those guys. He's a great diplomat, and he doesn't give off any type of a perceived threat, territorial or otherwise. He's very amiable, nice guy, soft spoken, and he does the talking with his playing. So he's
Yeah,
one of
because
those
like
guys.
yeah,
Yeah,
it kind of reminds me too. I think you mentioned this in an interview. The Don Costa guy who joined W.A.S.P after you, he was kicked out of W.A.S.P and Ozzy for almost like overshadowing, right? Because he played his bass with a cheese grater or something like that. Or what did he
yeah,
do? He had some stunt that like took out too much attention from the frontmen.
he would upstage whatever bands he was in. Now to go back, Mark Kendall from Great White had played with Don, with
Yeah,
Dante Fox before Was.
yeah,
And originally he said Donnie never moved. He just kind of stood there. He was a really good bass player, but there was no charisma on stage. And he's like, move, move, get out of the shell, move a little bit more. And Donnie came out of his shell, but he became this wild man on stage. And I don't remember where the idea came from the cheese grater. And of course, this is the days before AIDS and HIV and all that stuff. And he would scrape his knuckles on the cheese grater, and he'd hold it out, and the girls would lick the blood off his knuckles. Yeah, I mean that's like,
yikes.
yeah, yikes, exactly. But this is everybody was looking for the next angle to shock the audience. I mean, when Blackie was in Sister, he was eating bronco worms on stage. And I said, what's a bronco worm? He said, they're like real big earthworms. They're really, really long. They're about as thick as your finger. And when you touch them, they wriggle, they move around. So he had a black box on the drum wires and it said bait written on it. And he would come out with it, and the band would be playing, and he'd pull one out of the box and hold it up. The whole audience could see this worm wriggling around, and he'd open his mouth and he'd swallow it right down his throat. And that would shock people because who the hell
Yeah.
eats worms?
So is some of this calculated? Because I heard you talking about the manager from W.A.S.P, this guy, what was his name, Mike Sallen or something like that, that he had books like from Goebbels and all these Nazis about how
No,
to
no,
use
no, no. Oh,
propaganda and stuff.
no. That's a little bit mixed up.
Okay.
The guy that was managing them when I came in, his name was Mike Forney.
Okay. Who
Not
was
not
the
to
guy
be
that had
confused.
the Nazi books?
That was Blackie.
Oh, Blackie had that. Okay.
Yes, when you walk
Oh,
into
okay.
his house, he had this little cottage, a rental cottage, and it had the walls went up like this and curved at the top, at the ceiling, and came back down. So it was kind of like half of a tunnel. And he had a little loft up, some ladder would go to a loft on one side. He would sleep in. He crawled through that window, and that was his loft. But to the right, immediately to your left, alongside the wall, he had this little bookcase. So he was a reader like myself, and I was like, "What's his? You got books? What's his books about Nazis?" Like that. And he was telling me about Goebbels and Hitler's press guys. And he said that's where I first heard the saying that the bigger the lie, the more people are going to believe it, the more outrageous it is, because it's too outrageous not to believe it. And
Hmm.
that's what they were using to promote Hitler back at the time. So he was taking this mindset of being so outrageous, it was just too absolutely off the wall to not believe it. And of course he used that when he kicked me out of the band, to dismiss the fact that I was ever in the band. So that was his big lie, like that. But he was using some of that mindset and applying it, because we would sit up for hours. He's on one end of the room, sitting on the other, and we talk for hours about this stuff. And he was from New York, I'm from New York, so there was a little bit of commonality on that. And and he was a nice guy, like that. And like I said, he would a certain time of the month, he would say, close all the windows, close all the blinds, like nobody lives here. Don't answer the door, nothing. And what he would do back then is before the utility companies got hip to it, you used to be able to screw off the glass bezel off the electric meter because they didn't have a collar on them then. And he would set the numbers back to what it was the previous month. I said, where did you learn that from? He goes, one of the books in my shelf. It's called Steal This Book. It was by Abbie Hoffman, who was a counterculture hippie guy. And he said this is what he used to do. He would unscrew that, put the numbers back, and put the glass bezel back on. And then, of course, that time of the month, here comes the meter reader. And he was reading the meter, and it's like, well, that doesn't add up because back at the office, it shows there's power being used. But here, the numbers are back to where they were. Now I
so
just
pretty
happened
smart guy. I mean, maybe not the most ethical person, but he read a lot and he knew how to get things moving.
He was also very broke. He was living hand to mouth. He would make fog machines and stage monitors and sell them through the local newspaper like that. And I had a day job set up waiting for me that was planned from New York. There was a company, it was a marketing research company I worked for in New York. They had a satellite company in Century City, California, in LA. And they arranged for me to be able to go transfer from New York to LA. The office manager called, set it up. She goes, we have one of our people transferring to LA, have a job there for him. And when I got up there, they said, we don't have anything open. We can't just create an opening. You're going to have to wait until we have the opening. We can't just let somebody go and put you in. So there goes my day job. There goes my survival. There goes my income. So I was starving right alongside Blackie. And now for him to have to split whatever little money he made with me, it didn't sit that right with him, but he saw me as an investment because, once I got the gig, I did the audition with them and I got the gig, he was real happy about that. But now I'm staying at his apartment. So I wasn't able to survive myself because if I did, I've been able to find my own apartment, have my own money. I might have been a little bit more valuable to the band, as far as at least having some money in my pocket. I'm speculating like that, but it was the first time that I had to experience what it was like to be without money and without food. And we would go out to the grocery store around the corner, and he would buy a little container of orange juice or chocolate milk and cookies. And I found myself, but I'm ashamed that I did it, but I would steal like a package of cheese, like individual slices of cheese, and just so I'd have something to eat. And then the kids that originally gave my number to Blackie in New York, well, they came to New York, and they got my number, and they would come up to the house sometimes during the daytime, and we'd walk down to the middle of Hollywood. And one kid would pull a couple of dollars out of his bank account, and they'd take me out and get me a burger, or there was a place on famous Santa Monica Boulevard called Okie Dogs. It was where all the runaways hung out, not the band. I mean, the actual kids, like that. It was a congregational corner. All these street people would hang out, and they served these big paper bags full of French fries that were just loaded with salt. And so we'd eat Okie Dogs like that and hot dogs or whatever. And that was kind of how I survived until I got into a better position. So it was hand to mouth, and so Blackie had said, this is going to be a new band. We need a new name. We need a new theme. I don't want to do anything that I used to do. And he's like just kind of fretting about what's this new band going to be? Now that you're in it, what are we going to do? What are we going to call it? Like that. I'm not going to call it Sister anymore. You had White Sister, which was a big LA band. You had Twisted Sister on the East Coast. There's too many bands with Sister in it. So that's what I was. I got a phone call from a friend in New York. I took his phone outside, a really long extension cord, and I was just walking around the courtyard kicking over leaves. And that's when I stepped on I saw a yellow jacket on the ground because, they go after you drop off a soda or sweets or anything. They're scavengers. So I stepped on it and I turned a leaf over and I didn't quite kill it right away. It was the tail, the stinger was still moving. It was squirming. And it reminded me of the old Green Hornet logo from the Green Hornet TV series that ran opposite Batman. I went back in the house and I said, I got an idea for a band name. So he's sitting there like this. He had this orange crushed velvet love seat. and he's thinking it like this, and he's watching a Yankee game, and he had the door open, and I walk. I said, and he goes, I says, what, like that, and I said, W.A.S.P. I said, I just stepped on one outside. I said, wouldn't it be a killer name for a band? And he looks up at the ceiling, and he's thinking, and he's thinking. He says, that's a good idea. He goes, that's a great. He goes, keep thinking like that. And that was the last of it. He went back to watching the ball game. A couple of nights later, we're at Randy's rehearsal studio down in Anaheim, and we finished rehearsing, and we called a band meeting. So it's me, Tony, Randy, and Blackie. And he says, we got a new band name. So Tony goes, what is it? And Randy goes, well, I wanted to call it Hellion, because that's what they call bad kids from Texas, where he's from. I said, I think there's already a band in Hollywood called Hellion. So Tony goes, what's the name? Blackie goes, W.A.S.P. So Tony goes, W.A.S.P. Who names a band after a bug? And I said, the Beatles, Scorpions, like that. It's not uncommon. And at that moment, that makes all four of us co-founders of the new band. It's we are now W.A.S.P. So that's
and
what
Randy
it became.
has validated you on this, right?
Yes, on Full and Blue Music, he did an interview, and they asked him, so was Rik really in the band, and did he come up with the name W.A.S.P? Randy goes, yeah, I'm going to join you with my black cup.
Nice.
My black cup, my lip service cup. He goes, yeah. He goes, I'm not going to take that away from him. Rik did come up with the name. He goes, Blackie stole it. He put the periods in it, like that, and yeah, because Rik was in the big. He goes, Randy's non-confrontational. If you try to corner him to get a specific answer, he'll try and go, well, I don't remember. I'm not sure. It was this or it was that or something like that, and so he said, yeah, Rik, he goes, I don't know why it didn't work out. I don't know, the studio or something. I don't know. He goes, we tried a lot of guys out like that. So, and come to find out later, before me, Blackie actually approached Don Costa that he wanted Donnie in the band. And Donnie kept going, no, I don't want to play with you like that. So he turned him down. Blackie got handed my phone number, and then he called me. We talked. They flew me out to L.A. You invoked the name earlier, Mike Sallen. Mike Sallen was a friend of Blackie's. He was the guy that drove us to rehearsal all the time.
Oh, okay. He was sorry.
Yeah, because Blackie's car wasn't working. It needed some work, and he'd have the money to get it fixed. For trivia people, Mike Sallen is the bartender in the video Blind in Texas. When they walk in and they go, we're here to do a gig. And he goes, what's a gig? Like that. And he takes the shot glass and pours it out, and it's acid burns on the bar. That's Mike Sallen.
Okay.
So Mike is the brother of Eddie Sallen. Eddie Sallen was Ace Frehley's guitar tech and first sound man for Kiss when they were first starting out. So there's the dot connection right there. And when Kiss would tour and they were on the West Coast, when they had a day off, Blackie would hang out with Ace Frehley. And he told me this story where Ace was sitting around a hotel. He said at the Riot on Sunset, where they used to have a lot of rock bands and parties and whatnot. He said Ace was bored. So he says, we went to a toy store. He bought like a whole box load of these little plastic green army men that had parachutes on them. You throw it up in the air with your parachute down. He says he had like 100 of these things in a box. And he went over, so he goes up to the railing. He was like on the upper floor, the top floor. And Ace tosses this box with all these little toy parachute soldiers off the balcony. And it's like hundreds of these little parachute guys coming down on Sunset Boulevard in the traffic, in between the cars. This is the funniest thing. It was a really funny story. That's like something I could see Ace doing.
That is funny.
That's like that. So
you have a lot of connections and stories like that. Because you also tried out for Ratt and the Greg Leon Invasion, who Greg Leon, if people who don't know, was in a band with Tommy Lee. He was not he says he was not in Motley Crue ever, but he was in a band with Tommy Lee, and they were trying to form something, and it didn't work out. But you tried out for his new band and Stephen and Ratt.
Well, and here's another tie-in to your interview with Don. Greg was the original guitar player in Dokken.
Was he?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Wow.
He was the original. I've seen the picture of it. I've seen Greg's interviews. There's a picture of him and Don and the other two guys. So he was in Dokken, an original, at least one of the early lineups of Dokken. I don't know if it was before or after Don went to Germany, but Greg had played with Don Dokken as well. So I think I saw Greg Leon play at the Troubadour or something. Walls of Marshall Sax. He's one of the loudest bands you ever saw. And I somehow I contacted him and I auditioned for him, and I didn't get the gig. And then I when I had moved out of Roxy's apartment, I moved in with someone else had an apartment. Anybody who knows where Cantor's Deli is in Hollywood, it's a big Jewish deli we used to eat at all the time. I lived right around the corner from there at this apartment on the first floor. And in order to network, to meet musicians, we'd have like rock and roll barbecues out on the sidewalk. Because our apartment just walked, we were first floor right there. And so we had this bar, and we would go around the clubs and we would invite all these guys from these bands to come hang out with us. We'd have rock and hot dogs and hamburgers and whatnot. And this way I got to meet various guys in bands and network and talk to them and say, well, I was in W.A.S.P. I worked with Thor and Kiss and blah, 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 blah. And the guys from Ratt showed, Steve Piercy was there. I forget who else, a couple of the other guys. And we couldn't get the charcoal to ignite. And I threw like half a can of the fluid on it, and it nuked. It made like a big nuclear cloud. Flame went all the way up in the sky. Everybody backed up and went, "Oh, this guy's nuts!"
Were these these weren't the backyard barbecues that the Guns N' Roses guys used to hang out at?
This is way long before that.
Okay, before that. Okay,
way long before that. We're talking. This is 1982, summer of '82.
Okay,
like that. So Stephen invited me to come audition for Ratt. And we were in his grandmother's garage in Culver City. Blotzer was on drums. Robin was there. Robin Crosby. I think Warren was in the band at the time. And they had given me a cassette tape of the songs, but there was no lyrics on it. There was no singing. It was just like a demo without the vocals. And I still have it to this day. And I learned the songs as best as I could, and I was playing. And Blotzer and I were not hitting it off really well. I was playing an Ibanez Destroyer bass. Looks like an Explorer, one of the original Carina Wood basses. And I had put these little silver prism stars on the fret markers. And Blotzer was like, he just decided to pick on me about that. And he goes, "Hey man, those disco stars, they gotta go. All right, that's just lame. That's corny, man. And besides," he goes, "I like a bass player that plays with his fingers. I go, play with the fingers, feel." I said, "Look, here's my New York coming out." I said, "I don't tell you what kind of sticks to use. I don't tell you how to use your sticks. I don't tell you what kind of drum heads to use. I play with a pick." At that point, I play with a pick. He goes, "Well, real bass players play with their fingers." I said, "Oh, like Paul McCartney, Gene Simmons, Tom Hamilton." Well, Tom plays with both his fingers and pick. I started Pete Way, pick and fingers. I said, there's great guys that use picks too. It depends on the feel, the attack of the song. So Blotzer didn't like that. I mean, we became friends. But so when I got the gig with Steeler, and our first debut for me and Malmsteen was at the Country Club in Reseda, and after the show was over, I was in one of the dressing rooms. I'm wiping my bass down. I see the guys from Ratt come walking by, going to whatever the green room was. And Blotzer looked at me, stopped, he backed up. He looked at me again through the doorway. He guess he didn't put two and two together. I said, "Not bad for disco stars, huh?" And then he remembered this is the guy that came and auditioned, and he just got real red in the face and took off. I busted up laughing. So it was just nice to have that little dig right back at him. So
yeah, that's funny. So like, how long were you in Steeler for? Because like, I know that Malmsteen has a reputation that he's difficult to work with or whatever, but I mean, you were able to work with him for a period of time, right?
Well, for as long as we were in the band together. It was late summer of '82. I think I had already spent a couple of months rehearsing with Warlord, and they were never planning on doing any live gigs. And I said, I wish you would have told me that when I first walked in the door. I spent several months rehearsing with them, and they had no plans to play live. It was going to be just a recording project. I said, "Well, guys, I'm a live player, so I'm going to have to say thank you and good night." I put an ad in Music Connection magazine, and Ron Keel saw the ad, Now, I had already seen Steeler once at the Roxy. I was there with Eric Carr, and this was Ron's original lineup from Nashville, and they were good band, hard rocking. Or I could tell right away Ron was going to be a big star. He had that kind of superstar charisma. He was definitely the pro guy. Not anything against you. The other guys are good players. Bass player didn't move. He just did one spot, kind of like a bass player in Judas Priest. Guitar player walked a little bit back and forth. Mike Dunnigan. He's a good guitar player, but the way it was told to me, they had just showcased for every label in LA, and every label turned them down. So Ross said, I need something that can compete with Ratt, Black and Blue, Motley Crue. I need something that next level up. He goes, people have mentioned your name. They talked about how you look and everything. So he saw my ad. He called me up. We talked. And I went down to meet him at what we call the Steeler Mansion, which was 3 gutted storefronts infested with roaches. That's why we call it the mansion, because it was everything but a mansion. and it was a common room with, and no furniture. The only thing was like the main support parts that were keeping it was like a wall, a room, a room like that. And I walked in and I in the rehearsal room, and I was like, walking around, I go, where's the gear? I mean, these guys are self-contained. They had a truck, they had lights, PA, everything, road crew. There was nothing there. It was just a drum riser. And Rod says, I fired the whole band. That's gonna echo ahead to Surgical Steel. What happened? I fired the whole band. Kind of a thing like that. And so there went the truck, the lights, the gear, everything went. And Ron said, I saw your ad. People mentioned your name and said you had this look. I didn't like dude myself up when I walked in. I wasn't like I was going on stage, I was jeans and like that, and casual, but I had the hair and everything. So he says, you got a really good look. I want guys that look like they're already signed and on the road. That kind of level. And you have that look. So I said, so what can I do for you? And he goes, here's a tape, learn the songs, no promises. Come back and we'll see what happens from there. I said, all right, fair enough. So I took the songs back to the apartment I was living at. I learned like 5 or 6 songs like that. I went back some days later, and we sat down, just Ron and I. He sat on a riser. I sat on a milk crate or something. And we just played the songs to each other. I think I had a little pig nose practice amp. I don't remember what he might have had an amp. And we just talked and we played and we talked and we played. And Ron was a big Kiss fan. So, I told him about my relation with early Kiss, and I was there watching them before Ace Frehley was in the band. I knew Sean Delaney, who taught Kiss all of their moves, their choreography, the breathing, all of that stuff. So I was, and Ron dug that. So, it's somebody, wow, who actually personally was there with Kiss from the very beginning, before they were Kiss. So that's kind of where it was at. And he had his new drummer, Mark Edwards, was in Texas. He was visiting his family. He goes, well, Mark's going to be coming back in a few days. We'll pick him up from the airport, and then he got his drums out of storage, and he set him up on a riser. And Mark was not very open yet to me. He was pretty much just to himself. He was quiet. And I get that, because, if you're too friendly with somebody and it doesn't work out, you don't want the bad feelings or anything like that. So I got that too. So Mark was a man of few words. And he was like a younger version of Tommy Aldridge. Had the same kind of haircut and, playing in gym shorts like Tommy does. That. So he set up his drums and we started to play the songs. And it sounded good. It felt good. There were some things that Mark worked up with me on, to which I'm indebted to him. He taught me the value of listening to what the drummer is saying, and when to anticipate what the drummer is going to say and how he's going to say it. And here's the meter, here's the head. I had just come from playing 6 nights a week, 4 sets a night from Jersey, months before that. I wasn't really, I didn't really have a meter problem, but it was not something that was on the top of my priority list. I was playing, we played everything from Joe Jackson to Judas Priest, the Doors, the Who, Zeppelin. So I was just playing what was on records. So now I'm still playing somebody else's material, but I'm playing with the guys that are actually like in the writing of it, like that. So Mark and I worked really tight. We worked out a lot of little accents and kicks and stops and things like that. Cute things between the bass and the drums as a rhythm section. So we got really tight. I like to say we're so tight you couldn't slip a piece of paper in between us. We're so in the pocket you wouldn't even know your change was gone, like that. And then so we got really tight. Ron was already in touch with Mike Varney, and said, we called him up and said, we're ready. We need a guitar player from hell. Little did I know that was going to prove itself as a prophecy, because that's exactly what we got, as a guitar player from hell. We did a three-way conversation with Malmsteen in Sweden and Varney and us. We were in LA. Varney was up in the Bay Area. And Malmsteen sounded like real gung-ho. Yeah, I want to come out there. I want to play with your band, and come to America. We're going to rock and like that. And we heard his tape. We were sitting there like, wow. The only thing we could compare that to at that time was Eddie Van Halen. It was like
Sure.
maybe Warren DeMartini and George Lynch were kind of all in that school. The sweeping arpeggios, the hammer-ons, and all that stuff. So we made the arrangement, and Malmsteen flew to America. We went to LAX to pick him up. And it seemed like the guy we talked to on the phone was not the same guy that came down the ramp off the plane. I mean, this hair swaying and the Vikings here, and all the occult jewelry and stuff. I mean, don't make no mistake. I used to wear that stuff too, but I think Malmsteen was like really into it, like a shock value thing or something. He was 19, he was a kid like that. I was the oldest guy in Steeler. I was 27, like that. And so, Malmsteen walks into it was the shock value. He thought he was going to walk into a nice house. Everybody was living comfortably like that, and he walked in and he saw this gutted building with roaches everywhere. And it was definitely a culture shock from what he was expecting when coming from Sweden. Different living style there. So we started to get to work, and we started working, going over the songs. And at one point, we stopped playing, and Yngwie says to Ron, "Hey man, is there something you could do to make these songs a little bit more interesting? Because they're really quite fucking boring." And it was that moment, that quiet anxiety moment in the room. It's just the air got really heavy, is the way I interpret it. And I looked up at Mark on the drum riser, and he looked down at me, and he just shook his head, and he looked up at the ceiling, rolled his eyes. And I'm thinking, did new guy just say what I thought he said? He just insulted the boss's songs. He told Ron to his face, your songs are fucking boring. And Ron did the quickest, if you know about in the acting business, what a slow burn is. Ben Turpin used to do it. They used to do it a lot in The Little Rascals when an adult would get really mad, and his face would get real red. That Ron did the fastest slow burn I ever saw. And he just stood there like stunned. And he goes, all right, cool, all right. And the next day we started auditioning other guitar players.
In front of him, right? Like right in front of his face?
Right. Malmsteen was staying with us. He was in one of the further rooms away. Like he was in the kitchen area where the waterbed was and more of the roaches. And he had to hear us audition with another guy and another guy and another guy and another guy. And nobody was hitting it. Nobody was getting close to the mark like that. And finally, when the last guy left, Yngwie comes back out. He goes, all right. I'll play the game. Let's just do this like that. And we settled down and we got to work. And that was, I got the official word that I was in Steeler on my birthday in 1982. It was December 28th, 1982. We're at the Rainbow. Ron said, congratulations, you're in the band. You're the new bass player. I said, okay, great. So that was the three. Yngwie didn't come in until, I want to say, February, almost a year to the day when I first arrived. He came in February of 83. So I had already been with Steeler for a couple of months, already working with them. Yngwie came in, and once we settled down and got past the monkey bars and the schoolyard stuff, we got really, 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 the four of us, incredibly tight like that. And when we weren't playing Steeler stuff, I would jam with Yngwie on like Scorpion songs and Deep Purple songs because he loved Richie Blackmore. He loved Uli Roth. So I knew that stuff from playing in Jersey. So we played, Deep Purple and Scorpion songs like that. And when he wasn't wearing the guitar, which wasn't very often, he seemed okay. He was like, like a kid at a toy store. We'd go out to the beach, we'd go out to here, we'd go out to eat, and he was a regular person. But when that guitar came on, he was like, Mozart. He was he wanted to call all the shots on how the music was arranged, like that. And so we found out within that month that our first show was going to be March 11th. It was like almost around the corner. So we really knuckled down, got to business, and they didn't have stage clothes. I had stage clothes. I had some stuff sent out from my dad, sent me out some of my stuff from New York. So I gave him spandex shirts to wear, spandex pants, and some jewelry. Here's a leather jacket. Here's this. Here's that. So I had extra gear that like Nikki shared with me later on. I shared with them, like that, in that spirit. And so, the first show was like everybody was like, "Oh my God, where are these guys? Who? People had seen me around, but they didn't put two and two together." Until now, that was my debut with Malmsteen, and they didn't know where to look. Here's the bass player and all this black leather, and here's this guitar player is like on fire. He's doing all these Blackmore moves, and like people are like, "Oh, wow," So we moved up the ladder pretty quickly, I guess. And then we played with Vandenberg, the Roxy. We supported Quiet Riot at Perkins Palace right as Mental Health hit #1 in Billboard. So it was an incredible moment. We were lucky. We got the openings or the support slot for Quiet Riot at Perkins Palace. It was several times beyond capacity. It was like a sweaty gymnasium just to walk into the theater like that. And we did well. We did really well. Received really well. I already knew Frankie and Rudy and Kevin. And as an opener, it's like this unwritten. You don't always mingle with the headliner. You don't go by their dressing room, kind of a thing. As me downstairs, I walked over to their dressing room and I said hi to Frankie and hi to Rudy and hi to Kevin, and they're shaking my hand. Ron's like, "What are you doing? Don't go down there. They're the headliner. You're just supposed to talk to them." And they all turn around and like, "We're friends. We know each other. It's okay. Relax. Lighten up, Francis." Like that. And so, so they were congratulating me. It's nice. You finally hit it. You're this band, one of the biggest cornerstone metal bands of LA. So it was a great feeling. We were doing really well, and until Malmsteen decided to leave. And looking back, it was inevitable. We were the jumping off point for him.
Yeah.
We were his sandwich board. So to speak, people who don't know what that is, back in the 20s and 30s, you'd have a guy walking around back and forth in front of a restaurant, and he'd have his wooden board on the front and back. We'd talk what we have for what we're eating today, what's on the menu, a sandwich board like that. And so that was, Malmsteen used us as his calling card once he was in America, and he was starting to already look around, and he talked to Phil Moog, he talked from UFO. He apparently got the gig with Alcatraz. Like that.
Yeah.
And so that was it. After our last show together, the next day he was already gone. We were supposed to have a band meeting. It was just me and Mark there. Ron wasn't there. Malmsteen wasn't there. Mark says Ron's dissolving the lineup. He's starting over, like that. I said, "What did I do?" He goes, "Nothing." He goes, "We're just starting over." So I said, "Are you still in the band?" He goes, "Yeah." Oh, all right. And no, that's what I was at a Steeler. That's what I decided to put Sin, another lineup with Sin together.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and then you had some other projects that didn't pan out, but you had some other really cool experiences. I don't think I've heard you talk about this, but I saw this on your Wikipedia that you played with Sam Kinison, the comedian, because he had that song, "The Wild Thing." You performed that live.
Yeah. What happened was, this is now I'm going to say 1988. Yeah.
I got it right.
Kenny Rubin, who was he was a mainstay at the Rainbow. He had he was like a manager for a lot of artists and stuff, and he handled all of the advertising accounts for the Rainbow and the Roxy for all the billboards. And he got all those. He had the arrange have whatever the artwork was on all of those billboards, amongst other things. Kenny was a real mover and shaker in the industry, in business, and he managed Randy Hansen, who was the Hendrix guitar impression guy. from Randy was out of Seattle, and he calls me up one day, and he says, "Do you want to play with Sam Kinison?" I'm like, "Yeah." How did you swing that? He goes, "Well, Randy, when he's not doing his own Hendrix show, he's Sam's guitar player, and Sam's main guitar player. So he says, get down to the China Club like right away. This is like a Sunday afternoon. So I got to ride down to the China Club. I had met Sam indirectly after something like Motley Crue show or this show, and everybody's like all coked up and partying and whatnot. So I don't know if Sam readily recognized, but like that. But he was really nice. Hey, what are you doing, buddy? Hey, look, come on, I got in, put the guys like that. We're gonna play, yeah. And he said, you want to play the early show or the late show? And I said, I'll play the late show. He goes, all right, great. So they played an early set. And there was an intermission. We rolled downstairs in the green room, the bar. And then I got a picture with Sam, me and him together, like that. And then the second show had started, and I didn't know. Everybody had dissolved and went upstairs, and I hear the music through the floor. So I run upstairs, and they're on stage, already playing. And the bass tech was a friend of mine, and he looks down at me, he sees me. He goes, I was wondering where you were. He goes, you're supposed to be up there. I said, yeah. What happened? What happened was Jimmy Bain was up there. Jimmy somehow talked himself into, getting up there and playing with Sam, and he was a bigger star name than I was. So, and so he goes, wait a minute. When they finished the song, he grabs Jimmy by the shoulders, brings him down the steps, stays there, unplugs his bass, plugs me in, pushes me up the stairs. He goes, go, like that. And Jimmy's standing there. I could smell the alcohol as he went past me. Jimmy was like 3 sheets to the wind. And he's going, what happened, man? What happened? What's going on, man? Why am I not? And who's that guy? Like that. And at that point, Sam was up talking to the audience. This happened real fast, this change. And he looks back at me. He goes, you ready? I said, like that. Yeah. He goes, all right. Then like that. Now, across the stage, there's, like I said, Randy Hansen. And it was one of those pinch me moments. Okay. Get your laundry list. Little Steven Van Zandt on guitar. Randy Castillo on drums. Jean Beauvoir on guitar. And you couldn't miss him, the big white mohawk. Okay. We worked with the Plasmatics and Ramones, all that. Really nice guy. Him. I don't remember who the keyboard player was. And a very inebriated
you say John Goodman was there? The
John
actor?
Goodman, thank you. It was 3 sheets to the wind, and he jammed on blues harmonica, like it was the Blues Brothers kind of a thing.
Okay.
And so we did a rendition of Wild Thing, which allowed John to play some blues harp in it as well. And you could smell the alcohol off of him, like 3-4 feet away. And he was still a big guy then. He didn't lose all that weight yet. But I mean, I'm on stage with these massive stars. And the closest that ever happened was I was on stage with Ronnie Dio twice for a live rendition of We're Stars. So this was like the second brush with greatness, if you will, and another hallmark from my resume to be playing on stage with these guys. And I'm telling you, Chuck, there was a million cameras going off. It was like diamonds, stars, and people with all these pictures. I don't have one picture of me on stage with Sam Kinison and all these guys playing. And years ago, somebody said, I was there. I took pictures. Let me dig them out. I got to find them. I never heard back about him. So
that must be somewhere. I bet. Have you ever talked to his brother? I think his.
Yes, I'm friends with Bill Kinison.
Okay.
To this day, but we wish each other happy birthday when our birthdays happen like that. And Bill doesn't have anything either. And I've asked Jean Beauvoir. I said, you remember we played, right? He goes, yeah. I said, do you have any pictures? He goes, no. And of course, Randy Castillo passed away. Rest in peace. He doesn't have any pictures. So I don't know anybody that has any pictures from the night that I played with Sam Kinison. So or any recordings.
Well, you have the memory though. That's even more important. Just the fact that you have that memory is amazing.
Yeah, I have the one picture of me and Sam downstairs. I said in the green room. He put his arm around me and had the bandana he ties around his head, and he's like partially making that Sam Kinison face. Like that. And that's all I have is that picture of Sam and I. But those are some of my my high points. I
Yeah.
was lucky.
Did you frequent the comedy clubs at all back then, or did you see a lot of the? Did you have interactions? Because I know you later ended up doing acting in some movies. Were you have friendships with some of the actors or comedians in the LA scene besides music?
Not so much the comedians. You can say hi to them as they're coming off the stage or whatever. A lot of people who are on their way up. Andrew Dice Clay, Roseanne Barr, and the people that Sam Kinison, those people and their entourage of other comedians who are working their way up. So yeah, I've gone to the Comedy Store quite a few times and saw them starting out their careers on their way up right before they hit like the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson or whatever the talk shows were like that. But there was a time when as we got into the '90s, after I one of my last bands was Thunderball, which Kenny Rubin was a manager of. He managed us for a while. We had a national Western Union commercial under our belt with send the money. I'm trashing you. You're trashing my stage. We played a band called Putrid Rage, and so I was collecting some nice royalties from the commercial. And so I every once in a while I get a call to do extra work from wherever there's a woman in Janet Cunningham, and she was a casting agent, and she would get work for tons of all of the kids. I say kids, would hang out at the clubs. We're living hand to mouth, and she'd get all everybody extra work. So we'd get to eat for a while and things like that, and a couple of bucks in your pocket and whatnot. So I did it was background, and for a lot of movies. Fast forward, I worked with Sidney Poitier on that personally. There was a movie with Rob Lowe and James Spader. I was in that.
In a movie with Danny Trejo and C. Thomas Howell called Dilemma,
yeah,
right?
Dilemma. That at that point, I was working in the film industry, like behind the camera.
Okay.
And I started out as a production assistant, and graduated really quick to assistant prop master. So anything an actor touches is considered a prop. And if he goes over to the wall and touches a map on the wall, now that's a prop because he touched it. Anything like that, incidental props. And so I learned really quick about what it's like to be a prop guy in films. And that first film I worked was Dilemma, with because the woman who was putting the crew together. We all had pagers at the time, and she paged me, and she was like hysterical. I need this. All right, and I met them at their production office, and Danny Trejo was in it. C. Thomas Howell, Sophia Sheena, who was in The Crow. A lot of faces you would recognize like that, and so I was doing some props and stuff. And I met the guy who was doing the armor, was the guy who handles all the weapons, Bill Davis. And so we were kind of like, he was a ex-military guy. My interest in all things military had come up to speed. So we would talk about military things and guns and ammo and things like that. And his assistant was an actual United States Marine, Marine Corps Marine. And he would work with Bill whenever he was not, on duty or whatever like that, but he couldn't always be there. So Bill says, I need a guy I could call all the time. You want to work with me? And I said, yeah, sure. So, whenever Bill would get a call for a film, he'd call me and we'd go and he was a prop master. I was the assistant prop master. And we'd sit down on the production meetings, and you go down the script and you figure out what you're going to need by way of props. Who's going to need what kind of watch does he wear? What kind of person is he? Does he wear a ring? Does he have does he smoke? And things like that. And when it came down to the weapons, we had to figure out what kind of weapons he needed. So, Bill had a lot of weapons that were adapted to fire blanks, which we did a lot of like that. And so I was working in the film industry with the props and the weapons and things like that. I worked on a TV series, Air America, with Lorenzo Lamas for their whole first season. And it was weapons heavy, weapons intensive. I mean, it was AKs, M4s, AR-15s, of course, a lot of pistols, handguns, things like that. Same thing with C. Thomas Howell and Danny Trejo. There's a lot of heavy gun activity in that. I got a bit part in one of the scenes. There was a shootout with a felon, and the director says, "You want to be one of the SWAT guys? I'm short. You want to be so we don't have to hire extra guys." like that from casting. So he said, yeah, go over to wardrobe. So I dressed up in a SWAT outfit. And there's a quick clip of me coming around a building like that. And I fired. There was a scene later in the film where we were doing a SWAT takedown of Danny Trejo's character. And I was working with a guy who was an actual Navy SEAL. So we worked really well. I mean, we had the SWAT, everything like that, and the gear and all. And I was like right along doing, like, he goes, have you done this before? I said, no. He goes, well, you seem to have an aptitude for it, like that, and we're doing the hand signals like they do and all that stuff. So I started to graduate a little bit more into knowing what I was doing, like that. And at one point I wound up after the LA riots, the Rodney King riots, and seeing the smoke columns coming up from South Central towards Hollywood. And I said, I'm a little older, but I want to be on the right side of the fence if the shit hits the fan. And back then in LA, we used to have expos, gun shows at various fairgrounds. So the Pomona Fairgrounds had a big gun show, and I went there, and the California State Military Reserve had a big display, and they were recruiting. And the Marines were there. They had their armored vehicles, and it was the military vehicle collectors. They were all in like this one area. It was all military village. And I was talking to the top sergeant. I said, I heard some rumor that you have civilians. It's not like joining the army active, but you have civilians. And if they're on duty, if they have long hair, they can put it like under a wig. Is that true? He goes, I heard something about that. He goes, let me look into that. I said, if you could do that for me and I don't have to cut my hair, I'll wear it under a wig. I'll join. He says, and he called me back a couple days later. He goes, we can get you that special dispensation. As long as you look, high and tight, a short hair, not touching your collar while you're on duty, you can do that. We'll do that. I said, all right, fine, I'm in. And that was 1995. I joined the California State Military Reserve, and you swear to the Military Code of Justice and all the articles. You wear the uniform. It's not active duty, so you don't get a DD 214 like an active military guy would. But we did parade ground stuff. I was in a electronics communications unit. Like that. So we did a lot of radio traffic communications between stations, things like that, opening a net, closing the net, stuff like that. I got attaboy commendations from my superiors for sticking to the book and doing it like that. And we go out and we do field exercises and set up the radio. I went out to the gun shows. I bought military camo nets. I bought spreaders. Everything's out of pocket. I put my TA-50 together, which was all of your own personal gear, your uniform, your name tags, insignias, your backpack, everything you need as a soldier. I put all of that together. Only thing is, we were not allowed to use firearms at that time. They do now, but they didn't at that time. And I was like a gung ho guy. I was the first guy of all the recruits in my unit to put together that whole kit. And so they brought me in as a corporal, instead of a recruit or as a private. Like if you have something more of value to bring in, they'll bring you in at a little bit of a higher rank. So I was brought in as a corporal, which is an NCO, non-commissioned officer, like that. And I was a gung ho guy. I was doing everything right, like that, and so on and so forth. And I was in them from 95 to 2000, because you could leave whenever you wanted. I was about to go for my sergeant stripe up to Camp Roberts up in the Bay Area. But that would mean that I'd have to forego working in the film industry, because if you're not available, again, somebody else will take your job. Good luck getting back in.
Right.
And that was my livelihood. That was my bread and butter. So I couldn't take that week or two off to go up to Camp Roberts for my stripe. And I said, I put in my resignation. I said, guys, I can't infringe on my lifestyle. Right. Like that. And so they understood, and I left like that. And so I people ask me, are you a veteran? And like, I had a check. I checked with the guys that were in the unit. They said, you wore the uniform, you swore to military justice. We were all, it's like a lowest branch of the Army. I said, so you're a veteran. So it's like a gray area like that. So
well, I
put in 5 years with the State Military Reserve. Like that. And what we would like augment the National Guard. If the National Guard got activated in case of a state emergency, if the governor activated everybody, then we step in. We're like the shortstop. We fill in the hole while the other guys are doing something over there. They got to move to that, so we move here. They move there, we move here, and we cover them like that. And that's
Gotcha.
there was a couple of state emergencies when Schwarzenegger was the governor, and we got activated. You know, and I was down at the base like all weekend, you know, like that, and then we got some unit commendations, some ribbon awards, and things like that, which I have. You know, I posted to Facebook every once in a while. So it was a way of giving back. You
Yeah.
know, my dad was in the Navy in Korea. My uncle, his brother, was a Marine in Korea. A lot of my family, my ancestors were all in military or police or whatever. So I was a little too old to join like the army and stuff and commit to that. But this was a way of giving back and you know just doing what I could with
Yeah.
that to give. Then you know I was there every weekend, the first weekend of every month. I was down at the base at Los Alamitos, and we drill and do all of our exercise stuff, the radio, all our military communications, things like that, and such and so forth. And we assisted the National Guard in their exercises.
Yeah, that's
So
cool. Did you also I know I gotta probably let you go here in a few minutes, but I did want to see, I thought I read something that you jammed with Guns N' Roses. When was that?
there was a concert at Santa Monica Civic, and I think it was either Guns N' Roses was playing or Warrant, one of those was playing Poison, something like that.
Hmm.
And there was a bunch of us rockers, you know, hanging out on the side, you know, by the backstage area, and we all got brought up on stage, and we did a rendition of Cheap Trick. We did Baby Likes to Rock, like that, and you know, I was rocking out with the, you know, Poison guys, and I remember Duff at that point he was wearing a flannel shirt around his waist like a kilt, which he did many times after that. So like that, and you know, we were all like rubbing shoulders with each other up on stage, things like that, and so that was another like nice little high point, you know, because I was popular. I was on the scene a lot, and so let's get Rik up here. Let's get Rik up here, like that. So the backstabbing thing wasn't always prevalent because a lot of these guys, we were all friends. We got along with them, and they knew me from Steeler, like that. So I did have you know, a reputation as far as like a pro guy, like that. It was just, you know, difficult getting into various gigs. You know, I was almost an angel at several different points during my career, and it was very close. Right before I joined Steeler, Greg Giuffria asked me, "Do you want to join Angel?" And he said Rudy Sarzo was filling in. And it was like that fork in the road. Do I join the band of my dreams, get to play with Punky, or do I stay with Steeler? You know, it was a hard decision, but you know, I stayed with Steeler, and at that point, Angel had fallen apart not long after that. They had come in the '90s. Punky, Frank, and Barry came over to my house. We talked more about possibly doing something, and it kind of fizzled. Nothing happened like that. So there were several times when it looked like I was going to, you know, get to do something with Angel, you know, and I still had that Punky Meadows rock and roll look. You know, I don't have that anymore. So, you know, it's a lot of it's the right place at the right time. Who you know. I was not into the party scene. It was the party ninjas, all the guys who would tour. That were in LA. When they come back off tour, all right, we got to do something. I'm itching. I want to play. So they'd start putting on these all-star jams. And I'd get invited to these all-star jams, and I'd sit there all night in the dressing room with my bass, watching all of these guys go by. When are you going to play, Rik? I don't know. They haven't called me yet. And then it's over. Rik, I thought you were going to play. So did I. Well, there was a couple of guys, bass players, played with big bands, and they didn't really rotate to let other guys in, so they would kind of commandeer that bass spot. Jimmy Bain was one of them. I think Phil Soussan was the other one, and it was like they were always well-connected guys, and they all got, you know, there was the, you know, the party ninjas, you know, and then they were all half of Peru up their nose and stuff like that. But I wasn't in that clique. I wasn't in that crowd. You know, I'm watching the guys from Black and Blue go by on the stage, come off, and Rich Perry go on, and this one and that one. I'm like, Rik, where are you going? I said, I don't know. I'm here. They asked me to come, and I asked the coordinator, when am I up? He goes, in a song or two, we'll get to you. And then it would be the end of the night. I'd pack up my bass and go home. That happened a lot.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, well, you know, that was Hollywood. That's the mentality of the people and the caliber of people that I had to deal. This was Kevin Dubrow's, you know, prophecy. Again, coming back
Wow.
to me like that. You know, when I got out of the living history reenactment, the Polish wing hussars, my ancestry and all that. I took a hiatus away from the industry for like about a decade or so. Getting back in around 2012 was tough. It was like get the wagons and make a circle. Don't let him back in. That's kind of how it felt. And my wife would see this, and she's like, "Why are these people treating you like this?" I said, "I don't know. It was hard getting back in. There's a couple of bands here and there that would let me get up and jam with them. That was my calling card. They would see me play, and they go, "Hey, I got another jam coming. Why don't you come and play?" Now it started to open up, and I was
Yeah.
playing, various jams in Orange County, at this club, at that club with these people, and they say, "Oh, he's not bad. He's a good guy. He's a good player. I get along with everybody. I compliment everybody. I praise everybody, and I just put the good and the positive out there. And
That's
if you can
great.
make a positive difference in the lives of others, you've won. You've already won at the Super Bowl before you've even walked on the field.
I love
And
it.
that's a
Yeah.
great mentality. That's what I've been doing.
And you have the second
Since
chance now with Freakshow. I hope this thing blows up. I hope it takes off. I hope you guys play the Monsters of Rock cruise. You get a good opening slot on a tour and all sorts of great stuff to come for you. I'll do my part and share as much as I can.
well, from your lips to God's ears, I thank you. I hope that that comes to fruition, and it'll be great. Uh, when my friend Randy Rand passed away from Autograph, I was friends with Randy, and a lot of people in his circle didn't know that. We had worked for a telemarketing company in the 90s, and we got to be really good friends. Um, when he passed away, I had approached the band. I said, when the dust settles, would you consider letting me come in and try out? And I never got any response or anything back. I got completely blown off. And it's like, just like the 80s. It's 80s mentality all over again. Rik Fox, no, you're a problem. You're going to have a bad reputation. You try to take over people's bands, and you're difficult to get along with. I'm like, where is this stupid sandbox attitude coming from? I have no idea, you know. And so obviously they've had some legal problems over the name and whatnot. And I become friends with Steve Lynch. I said, hey, if anything ever happens, I'll throw my hat in the ring. If you want a bass player, let me know. And I become friends with Regina Rand, Randy's wife, his widow. And Randy passed away like a month right before my wife did. So we were kind of helping each other mentally go through the grief counseling thing like that. And so, Regina said, if Autograph ever reforms, you have my blessing to replace Randy. I'm like, well, thank you. That's a very high compliment, and I thank you for that. She goes, well, you helped me a lot up here, and with helping me get through the fact that my husband passed away. And I said, well, we're all helping each other. I've been married to my wife Tara for like 22 years. I'm still in the grieving process. I can't forget that. Now I'm in Missouri by myself. We bought the house together. We're going to start over here. And then a year after we moved here, cancer came back and took her. And there was nothing I could do about it. And so here I sit, what's next, Lord? Where do I go from here?
Yeah,
And
I'm sorry to hear that, but I think that the good things are coming. I think this freak show thing is going to be a great project for you, and I'm excited for you to showcase your bass talents in this band. It's going to be amazing.
it's been a while since I've hit the stage, so it's going to be a little nervous the first couple of
Sure, sure.
steps out, but once we're past like the third song, I start to
Yeah.
get a little more relaxed.
All the greatest things in life are on the other side of fear, so you just got to push through that.
Oh,
Is the
absolutely.
album out now, or is it just a couple songs?
Yeah, no, it's out. There's a little
All right.
glare on it. There's the
Yeah.
CD, and both Greg and my pictures are included
Oh,
in on the liner notes
that's
like
cool.
that. So they did pictures with Greg, but then when they flew me to Reno and we shot the two videos for You Shine and It Hurts Me, we did a photo session, and some of those pictures are included in the liner notes on the Freakshow album, like
Oh,
that.
great.
So yeah, it's a great album. I advocate for people to go out and get a copy of it if you're really into the 80s rock, that we're all missing now. The whole the 90s thing, the anti-90s attitude is coming back because it's like everybody's missing the nostalgia of the 80s. This album is just what the doctor ordered. It's full of it. This is you love 80s rock and metal and great songs and hooks and great vocals. Freakshow, you can't go wrong.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rik, and we'll be in touch.
It was an honor being on your show. It's a high privilege, a feather in my cap to be on your show. It's a great honor. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. It was fun. Great stories.
My pleasure and my honor, and it was a privilege. Thank you so much,
right, thank you. Bye-bye, Rik.
All right, take care.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the full podcast episode. Please help support our guests by following them on social media and purchasing their products, whether it be a book, album, film, or other thing. And if you have a few extra dollars, please consider donating it to their favorite charity. If you want to support the show, you can like, share, and comment on this episode on social media and YouTube. And if you want to go the extra mile, you can give us a rating or review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts. Finally, make sure you're subscribed to the show on YouTube for the video versions and other exclusive content. We appreciate your support. Have a great rest of your day and shoot for the moon.